Okay, so today we're going to be doing more Django stuff, and we're going to look at nested routes again. So this will be, we've seen, one level of nesting, and we're going to just look at an example with two levels, just for the sake of kind of bringing the point home that you can nest routes. So in terms of what you need to worry about for the upcoming assessment, this is, a little bit more, but the same basic ideas hold. So we'll go ahead and get started. I have, if you're pulling from the repo, you should be on, if you're on the master branch, you'll have this. So the project is started for you. So the way it's going to work is we're going to have restaurants, menu, and then dishes. So a restaurant can have lots of menus like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then a menu can have lots of dishes on it. So if we look at our models, go into restaurants, which is our app, we have models. This is set up. So we have name and then a style, and there are only 3 options. It's obviously just arbitrary, but so we have a name and a style, and then a menu has a restaurant, which is a foreign key. So a restaurant can have lots of menus, and again, only 3 options: breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And then so the time will be basically the kind of menu that it has. And then a dish. So menu can have lots of dishes, and so dish has a foreign key linking to menu, and then it has a name and a price. So that's the models, and then the URLs are also set up. So here at the project URLs, anything with restaurants, anything that starts with restaurants is going to get handed off to the restaurants app. And then the restaurants URLs, we're going to have 3 sets. So we're not doing the complete CRUD, just because that will be very time consuming. So this should give you the idea. So the basic route is, you can see all of the restaurants, and then you can see restaurant detail. So going to the ID of the restaurant. We're not going to use slugs or anything like that for this. And then we're also not going to do any authentication, just focusing on the nesting. And then we're going to have the menus. So a restaurant has lots of menus. So it will be /restaurants/2, restaurant ID 2, and then /menus. And you can get all the menus for that particular restaurant through this endpoint. And then you get a detailed view on menus, same thing. And then the 3rd level will be the dishes. So this is restaurants /restaurants 2, menus 1, and then you can see all of the dishes that are in that menu for that given restaurant. And you can see the list view and the detail view. And then here, just to kind of hint at the full CRUD capability, we'll have a create view here. So you can go to dishes new and create a new dish for a given menu for a given restaurant. Okay, and I'm going to be doing this using the class-based views in Django, just for some more exposure. Although you don't have to use class-based views. And then this is all just stubbed out. So we have list view, detail view, and then create view. So these the first 2 pairs, the pairs for the first 3 are very similar: list detail, list detail, list detail. And then I also I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy the templates as well. Let's save some extra time. Okay, and let me go back. Okay, I'm gonna add those templates. I'm gonna switch back. Okay. All right, so now we are up to date for real. Okay, so again, if you're starting, sorry about that. So I have the templates now. So the repo should start with the templates there. All right, so now from here on out, we're going to be working on the solution. So first thing we do, I'm going to go to the, well, let's go ahead and make migrations and take care of all that. So let me make sure I'm in the right directory. Okay. All right, I'm going to create a super user. Okay, I'm going to run the server and we'll check this out. Then I'm going to go get the admin terminal going. We can see that we have our models here because I have connected them in the admin.py file. Okay, so we have restaurants. If we go to these, we're going to get an error because it doesn't return an HTTP response object. But we can go ahead and create some dummy stuff. So I'm going to create a couple restaurants. So okay, and then go to menus. And I'm going to add, let's say, a breakfast and a lunch to the first restaurant. And then the second restaurant, I'll add dinner and lunch. Okay, then we go to dishes. And you'll just add 2 for I'll add 2 for each one. Maybe I'll stop after this. Okay, so I didn't override the string method, so can't really see much there. All right, so we have, I think, enough data to get us started. So now you go into the restaurant list. So the documentation will, help you here, but there's a couple things we need for sure. We have to tell it the model. So model. So the list view for the restaurant is going to be restaurant. And then the template name. So we have templates already here. Otherwise, you have to create them. But we have restaurant list and restaurant detail. So this will be restaurant list. Okay. And then just to show you that you can customize a lot of this stuff. So if we go into the restaurant list, So I have written this expecting that the object that gets passed in as context, the object that I care about here, the query set with all the restaurants, is going to be called info. This is just, totally arbitrary. But you can customize that on the view. So you tell Django that the context object name is info. So when it passes in that that object, you'll have you can call it info. And then let's see. So another thing, if we look at let's look at the templates again for the restaurant list. We have this title, but that's not coming from anywhere. So we're going to have to create that. So in order to create that, we will override, go back to the views, get rid of that. Go back to the views. And if we want to override, if we want to add anything to the context data, like a title, for example, we can override, there's a method on this class called getContextData. And again, you would know this from looking it up. This will self, args, and quargs. And if we do this, we can actually get the context object initially. So what we want to do in this case is add context data. So we want to get the context that's there and then add a new entry to it. So you can get the context data by calling, we'll assign this to a variable, and this will be super get context data. Get oops. And we'll pass in the args or quarks. Okay, so now we have access to the, the original context data, which is going to have this info stuff on it. And we want to add a title. So you can call this whatever we want, but since it's already in the template, we know that we need to call this title. And the title for this is going to be restaurant list, because it's the restaurant list. We could do whatever we want. And then finally, we'll return context. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. Hopefully that should be working now. If you go to restaurants, we can see all of these restaurants. Okay, the first one and the second one. And if we go to the detail view, obviously that won't work. But we can see we have the restaurant list here, which we, customize through overriding the get context data. Okay, so let's handle the detail view now. So that will look similar in a lot of ways. So we're going to need a model, and this will be restaurant. And we're going to need a template name, which will be restaurant detail. Okay, and let's look at restaurant detail. So title. So it's, obviously this is just kind of stupid, but we're expecting this to be called I, this object that's getting passed in. So we're going to have to customize that on the view. So we'll again override the context object name, and this time it will be just I. And then another thing you can do is, so if you look at the URLs, here we're calling this REST ID. So when you use a functional view, you don't have to worry about this. But if you use a class-based view, it's basically going to expect this to be PK. And we're overriding that. We don't want to call this PK, and so we can give it a more descriptive name. So if we do that, we're going to have to tell Django and PK URL kwarg. This is how you tell it what that name is going to be. So in this case, it's REST ID, restaurant ID. So now we're gonna, okay, so we have the restaurant ID. We could have made this PK, which is the default, and then not overridden that, but again, you can customize all this stuff. So view, now we're going to, we also want to add a title. It's going to be restaurant detail. So we're going to do something, I think I can just copy paste this. Get context data, super restaurant. So that should work. Let's give that a try. So again, we're overriding the context data so that we can add the title, because our template expects a title. So let's try going to the detail view. Template is not. Okay, restaurant detail. Restaurant detail. Let's spell this. I always have to think very carefully about how to spell restaurant. Let me try restarting this. Doing something stupid here. Restaurants. Okay. All right, so we'll go back and make sure the links work. Okay. All right, so now we have, this is the basic, first level, the list view and the detail view. So we're not doing full CRUD, we're just doing read, or the get part of that. So now we're gonna add a nested route. So we have all the restaurants, and restaurants have lots of menus. So let's get all of the menus for a given restaurant. And with the menu list class, it's going to look very similar. So we need the same basic things, model, template name. Restaurant slash list.html. And then let's take a look at the menu list. So we have title. So we're gonna have to do the same thing. We're gonna have to add that context in. And then it looks like this is also expecting the context object to be called info. So let's fix that. Go back to the views. Yeah. Context object name info. And then we're gonna have to override the get query set, which is just like we did before, or get context data. Okay, and this will be menu list. So that's fairly straightforward, and we'll see if this works. So we also we're going to have a query set. So what we need to do here is we basically need to get all of the menus that belong to whatever restaurant is right here in the URL. So if it's restaurant 1, we need to get all of 1's menus. If it's restaurant 50, we need to get all of 50's. So if we want to have a more complicated query, you can override the get query set. So there's a get query set method. So, and again, you would know this. You would know this from looking at the documentation. So get query set, you basically will return the query set that you want to have. So in order to get that, we're going to need the ID of the restaurant. We're going to get the ID of the restaurant from the URL. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can access, a whole bunch of information you can access from this class, and one of them is the quargs. So we'll take a look. We'll print those out and see what we get. But let's do rest ID. This will be self.quargs, and we'll get, what's it called? Rest ID. This is from our URLs, calling it, we're naming it right here. And then we're going to return the query set, and we're going to filter, we're going to use filter to only get the menus that belong to this restaurant ID. So return menu dot objects dot filter. And we will do, let's look at our models real quick. So menu has restaurant. Oops. So restaurant underscore ID. So this is the restaurant's ID. This is, remember, it's the double underscore here from way back when we were doing more of the backend focus stuff. So we have the restaurant's ID, and that will be rest ID. So let's go ahead and print rest ID here. And let's try going. I don't think we fixed that route yet. Okay, so let's, sorry, jumping ahead here on the URLs. Slash menus. Okay, we did have that ready to go. We have an issue, menu detail, rest ID, ID. So once you start getting nested routes, it gets a little more, same basic ideas, but a little bit more complicated. So here in the template, if you take a look at the list, we're trying to build a link here. And so we're going to create this URL, and since we name the route, menu detail right here. So menu detail, and then we need to pass it 2 parameters, because in the URLs we have this rest ID, the restaurant ID, and the menu ID. So there are 2 pieces of information that we need there. Go to the views. Go to the templates, the rest ID, and I.id. So I is just the ID for the menu. So the restaurant's ID and the other ID. So the problem is that we don't have this information available by default. So we have to pass it in. But we can get that information and pass it in. And we do that just like we did with the title. So by default, this context object is only going to have basically this, whatever it gets from the query set. and we're adding title. We can also add, we have to add something called REST ID. So context. So context REST ID is going to be, so we can basically copy this right here. And I forgot to take a look at this. So here are the quarks, by the way. We're printing those out. Wasn't looking. So I'm just going to print out self.quarks. So you can see. Let's try that again. Okay, and if we look at the logs here, we can. Here's the quarks that we have. So REST ID, which is coming from our URLs, since we named it. REST ID, it's getting passed in there, so we can access it in the view and then pass it into our template. So now our template has all the information that it needs. Actually, I left this stuff in. I can comment this out, but that's fine. Okay, so the menu detail, if I go here, obviously it's not going to work because you don't have it set up. But if we look, we can hover over and see that the links, so menus 1 and then menus 2. So these look like they're working now, they're ready to go. They just need the destination route to work. So we're going to have to, so we've got the restaurant list, restaurant detail, and then the menu list. And again, this is only getting the menus for the first restaurant. So I should maybe point this out as well in the templates. Okay, so here I'm getting the restaurant name, even though I'm directly passing in the menu, a menu object. I can access the restaurant's name because there's a foreign key relationship. So this menu object, the restaurant field name right here. And then the name, so the restaurant, so menu, basically like in this case, add name, restaurant name. So that's how we're getting the name to be displayed right there. Okay. So we know that these are all the first restaurant. So if we try 2, we should get only menus for the second restaurant. All right, so we've got that figured out now. So let's add in the views, let's add the detail view. So some repetition here. So I won't do it here, but you could, if you notice that you're doing a lot of very similar things, you could pull out a class with common information and then subclass all of these. But we won't worry about that right now. So the menu list view and then the menu detail view. So we'll have the model. This will be menu and the template name. Copy this. That'll be the menu detail. And let's look at the menu detail just to see what we need. So this time, so maybe it might not be obvious what's happening, but this is actually not overriding the context object name. So here we were overriding the context object name, but here in this case we don't actually have to. So I'm not. So this template is not expecting you to do that, and by default Django will just call it object. So in the detail view, it's just object.restaurant.name and then object.time. So we'll follow that. If you want, you're free to change these, and then you can change the name, but just so you can see the possible variation. Let's see. And then so one other thing that we're still going to need is the right here, the PK URL kwarg. So it won't be REST ID, it will be, let's look at our URLs. It will be menu ID. Okay, and again, because we've renamed it, we have to tell Django that we're not using the default stuff. All right, and then the get context data should also be the same. I'm going to copy this, paste that. So get context data. Again, we still want the title, so not menu list, but menu detail. And then I don't think we need, let's see if we need that. We won't really need, yeah. So depending on how you want to grab this stuff, but we will need a get object. So query set, so this is a list view. So it returns a query set, you know, basically an array of objects. A detail view, you only get one. So it's like using get instead of, so using get on a, so not a query set, but just one particular thing. So we do def get object. And then we're still going to need to get the that information from the URL. So if we go here, let's say if we go to this view, which doesn't, you know, it's kind of problem right now, but so this number 3, so we want menu with an ID of 3. So we need to get menu with an ID of 3, and we can do that just like we did above with this query set. So it'll be different, so I won't copy paste it, but we'll do menu ID equals self.quargs, and then menu ID, because that's what we called it. Get rid of this print statement. And then we can just return, so not filter to get a query set, we need to return just one particular thing. So this will be menu.objects.get, and then PK will be menu ID. All right, so let's save that and see if that works. Okay. And menu detail. Okay, so let me quit this and restart it. You might need to mess around with the templates. Okay, so we're getting to the page now, but not all the information is being shown. So let's take a look at menu detail. So object.restaurant.name, object.time. Let's see. All right. Okay, detail view, menu ID, self.quargs, menu ID. Oh, okay, so I'm not returning this here, just the oversight. So you have to return the object, otherwise I won't have anything. Let's see if that works. Okay. So let's go back here to the menu list. So all the menus for restaurant ID 2. And this is the lunch menu. And if we go back, we can see there's the dinner menu and lunch menu. So we can look at the dinner menu, which has an ID of 3. Okay, so now we're doing nested, you know, CRUD. I mean, we're not really doing full CRUD, but we're doing nested routes. So, but you know, there's no logical reason why you can't keep doing this forever. So let's do one more level, and we'll get the dish list view. So again, very, very repetitive. So we'll have the model template name. Model is dish template name is restaurants / and then dish list. All right. Model is dish, template name, dish view, and then let's look at the dish list template just to see, what it's expecting. So it looks like we're using this template is expecting the default name that Django will give. So in this case, object underscore list, because this is a list view. So if it's a detail view, it's just object. If it's a list view, it's object underscore list. So we can ignore overwriting the name, overwriting the context object name. So we've got a list view, and then we need to do the same thing. We're overwriting the get context data for one, because we need the title. So I'm just going to copy this. So the title will be not menu list, but dish list. And then so at this point in our route, we're here, or we will be. So we have the REST ID and then the menu ID. So there's two things that we're going to need. So we're going to have to add those to the context object. So the REST ID and then context menu ID. So the restaurant and the menu. So the dish belongs to a menu, which belongs to a restaurant. Okay. We have the context data, and then we should also override the query set, because we don't just want all dishes. We want the dishes that belong to a particular restaurant. So I'll have to do the same thing we did with menu, or we just filter. So let's look when we did this menu. I'm going to copy this. Very similar. So get query set will override. This is a list view, so we have to deal with the query set. So this will be menu ID. Menu ID, and then this is a dish. So dish.objects.filter, and it won't be restaurant ID, it will be menu, the menu ID. Again, we get that if we look at the models. So dish has a foreign key menu. So menu can have lots of dishes. So we can access the menu through here. So dish menu. Okay, and the menu's ID. All right, so that should be good. Let's see if that works. I don't have a link here, so we'll just type this out by hand, but dishes. And we get a dish list, so we get the page, but we're not actually displaying anything. So let's look at the dish list again. So the title is working. Okay, so the title's working, and then object list. So probably a problem with our query. Dish.objects.filter. Let's print this just to be sure. I'm going to print this. Okay, Go here again. And we have an empty query set. To dish.objects.filter menu ID. Let's check this real quick. Okay, so 3 dish.objects.filter, and let's go into the admin panel. Dish. Okay, so you can see that this has an ID of 3. This dish has an ID of 3. So it does exist. It's associated with the second menu, which is right here. So that okay, so the menu ID, that is something, dish.objects.filter. Let's try just doing all. Okay, so that does work. Filter. Menu ID on the dish. So let's check the models again. The dish has a menu. So that should be menu __ ID is ID. One more time. Okay. I'm flailing a little here, so pardon me. Try the old restart and do the same thing again. All right. Dish objects menu ID. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead into the shell and take a look around and see what the deal is. So Python manage.py shell. I'm gonna import. So from models import dish. So dish.objects. Oh. Okay, and I'm going to go into the models. I'm going to override the string method here. Recording that. No. That's why I use Django extensions, so you don't have to keep re-importing. Okay. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that looks okay initially, and then let's try this. So the ID, the menu ID, I believe was 3 in this case. So let's do dish. Okay, so maybe this is just a result of not having menus for the third one. So let's do 2. I think I just didn't have enough data for that, and I wasn't handling errors, which should always do. Dishes. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's progress. So let's see all the dishes. Okay, we have we can see all of the dish items for menus, the second menu of the second restaurant. So these 2 things. So that's only things that belong to this menu show up. And if we did, let's see, menu 1. All right, so we have the list view. So we'll take care of the, let me fix this. All right, so now let's take care of the detail view. Same stuff. So model is dish, and the template name let's take a look at the dish detail, and it's using object, so we're not overriding the name of the context object. So this time we're going even more in depth. So this object, which is a dish, so the dish is menus restaurant's name. So we can go all the way to the name of the restaurant from the dish. Okay. So the other thing we do need, if we look at the URLs, we're going to need this dish ID. We're going to have to override the default. So that will be pk_url korg, be dish ID. And then here we're also going to need context data. So context data, we're going to need this dish list. I believe that's all we're going to need. Dish list. Let's try that. Okay, the context data, and then the get object. Well, not get query set, but we'll override get object, because we want to get not all the objects, or not just a particular object, but particular object. Well, I'm not even sure we need to override get object, but we'll do that anyway. So the dish ID we can get from the quargs. So dish ID equals self.quargs dish ID, and then return dish.objects.get. Make sure it's get, not something that returns a query set, and then PK or ID is dish ID. All right, let's see if that works. Okay, so we're 3 levels in here. So the second restaurant's first menu's first dish. So yeah, we have access. This is the first restaurant. Should not be. Yeah, I think there's an issue here. Yeah, I'll think about that in a second. Okay, so get context data, then get object, and then we'll move on to creating a view. So we're gonna need a form, and the basics are gonna be the same. So we're inheriting from create view this time instead of detail or list view. So model is dish, and then the template name is /the dish create, and we'll look at dish create. So we have this form, standard form, nothing much going on. Okay, you don't really need to pass information in. We will need to override the PK, and actually, what did we do? Okay, so for the create view, we have the model, we have the template name, and then the fields. So let's try doing all. Go to new. Here's the form to create one, and we can see that we can choose what menu it belongs to. But we may or may not. Let's say, yeah, depending on what you're doing, you may or may not want someone to see this. You might want to just get it from the URL. So you can do that. Let's just try creating another one. So menu object 4. Okay, so we can see if that worked. Let's go to the dishes. We have this dish that just got created, but our redirect is bad. So we have a couple things we can do. Provide URL, get absolute URL method on the model. We can also have a function that will return a success URL. So get success URL. And I'm going to return reverse lazy in the route. I'm just going to go to the dish list. which is basically right here. In order to do that, I'm going to need these two, the rest ID and the menu ID. So I have to pass in some quargs. So we'll do rest ID. And we're going to get this just like we have been from the quargs. So self.quargs. And then the other one is menu ID. Quarks equals. Okay. Let's see if that part works. Okay, so that works. We go to, I don't know what the fourth menu is. All right. So now we can do that, but let's just say that we don't want to show all of the fields. We just want to show the name and the price. We can handle that. What's it called? Name. It is name and price. Okay, and we want to add something. We want to add the menu. We want to add the menu to this. So when we save it, we want a menu instance to associate with this. So you can override that a couple different places, but form valid. Stop doing that. And then that will be self, and that will take in the form. And we can do the same thing we would do on a view where we do commit is false. So form equals form dot save. Commit is false. And then we're going to add what we want. So we have a field called menu, which is the foreign key here, menu. So form dot menu is going to be something. And that needs to be an instance of menu. So menu dot objects dot get. So we need to get the menu associated here, and we can grab that from the URL. So we'll do pk equals self.quargs, just like we've been doing. And that will be menu ID. And then we need to return, oops. So we're adding this so we can just call super again. So we'll basically add something to it, and then we can call form valid again. Super form valid and form. All right. So we have to create a new dish, and this time we don't have that. So let's go to create something. Okay, so this is validation coming through. I said it can only have 3 digits. Dish create view. Let's take a look at that. First off, let me see if that got saved. So it belongs to the 4th menu. Okay, so that got saved. There's an issue. This dish create view didn't return HView. So probably an issue with the success URL here. Let me double check the name. Dish list here. Dish list, quargs. REST ID, menu ID. Just try doing. Since that works. New restaurants that use the dish. Why would that? Should just be redirecting. Let me comment out the success URL here. Get a different error. Properly configured. Okay. I'm just going to try initially return reverse lazy. And this will be, let's do rest list. Something wrong with what I'm doing here. Get success URL. Let's see. I'm going to pause it right here and try to figure this out. Okay, figured it out. I did not return. So this form valid overrode it. You need to return here. You need to return the form. So I wasn't returning it. So now that I'm returning it, it should work. So I create a new dish. And it should be at the bottom there. I go to the detail view and it exists there. So that's that. It's a little, I mean, there's a lot going on, you know, overriding some of these methods. It's maybe in some ways If you start doing custom things, it can be less intuitive than function views, but so that's the basics. For the assessment tomorrow, not tomorrow, for the assessment, which I'll give you on Thursday, you really only need to, you really only need to be able to do basically like the beer reviews challenge. So 2 levels of depth, doing all of the CRUD functionality, create, read, update, and destroy, and you won't need the authentication and stuff. But for now, so that just another pass through nested routes, and that's it.